transfer students, it can be an issue because you'll lose credits a lot of times if you transfer between schools. So the number of semesters that a student is eligible for the state grant program doesn't account for the fact that some students might lose credits, and posse students are more likely to be transfer students.
Right.
Also, developmental education courses count against your state grant eligibility, but you don't get college credit for it. So then posse students are disproportionately placed into developmental education, and then they can run out of state grant when they're almost done with their bachelor's degree, and now they're having trouble paying for it when you're like close to the finish line. So students of color, there's a few different issues. Students of color disproportionately attend community colleges, and community colleges use a test in Minnesota called the AccuPlacer to decide if students, what level of coursework students should be placed into. The AccuPlacer, there's no evidence that it's aligned with the MCA standards that students are expected to meet in high school. So there's a misalignment between what's expected and then what you actually go get tested on to say whether or not you can do college level work. And there was a lot of interviews with students to find out what's working for them, what isn't. Issues of college affordability came up, DevEd came up. But then we pulled together the creat group, which brings together folks from across higher education systems. So I come from the private nonprofit sector. There's someone from the University of Minnesota, someone from Minnesota State, folks from community organizations, people who work doing higher education related research nationwide, seeing what's working in other states. Because, higher ed, it can operate in these silos, right? There's not necessarily what's happening in Illinois versus Minnesota, or what's happening at Augsburg versus at University of Minnesota across the street. Do we know what's working and what isn't, right? So then we brought together folks to talk who had different areas of expertise. From the research brief, there were 5 or 6 policy recommendations related primarily to the state financial aid program. And then the group came up with another 5 or 6 policy recommendations around developmental education reform of holistic student supports, a focus on anti-racist teaching practices and cultural competency and relevant teaching, and the idea of creating some type of challenge grants to encourage colleges to improve transfer processes for students so they aren't losing credits.